Hey, welcome everybody. My name is David Spock. I am your host of the CISO series video chat, but I'm not the producer, as I've often made that mistake. No, the producer is Andrew. He's working the background, making all of this happen right now. So I greatly appreciate you all being here. Let me just go through the basics of what's going to happen today. Today's topic is hacking cloud collaboration tools, an hour of critical thinking around securing apps like Google Workspace and Office 365. Our guests for today are Steve Tran, who's the CISO of MGM Studios, and Michael Coates, the CEO of Altitude Networks. And a huge thanks to Altitude Networks for sponsoring this very video chat. All right, 5 different ways to participate. Those of you who are regulars, take a snooze at this point. You know what this is. You can join us in the chat room. That is half the show. Submit bad ideas on our topic, which is hacking cloud collaboration tools. Join us on video with a bring me on. Any question or comment you may have, just say bring me on. Ask a question if you want. That that could just be a normal question that you ask in the ask a question, which is at the bottom of the screen. And also you can just vote for your favorite question if you want to make sure it's asked. All right, here's the format. Submit your questions, submit bad ideas. And by the way, for those you don't know, you just type bad idea, : and then whatever your bad idea is. The poll will go live at 20 minutes past the hour. At 30 minutes past the hour, we will not play Department of Yes. We'll play Beat the Bad Idea. Those of you who were not here last week will see what that is like. Then you'll vote for your questions again. Then we'll play a round of What's Worse. And the winner from last week, Kevin Hackinson, is going to have the 2 bad ideas. They'll go head-to-head in the What's Worse scenario. Then we'll ask the last question and have our fan-level advice. And then a rollover to the icebreaker. And if you have never joined us in the icebreaker, it is a lot of fun, okay? One-on-one meetings with other cybersecurity professionals. That happens at the end of the hour. You do want to join that. It's a lot of fun. All right. And then let me just also mention that our topic for next week is hacking cloud vulnerabilities, an hour of critical thinking of the risk and reward of cloud-based vulnerability management. There is a link at the very bottom of the screen that will take you to that. You will not be taken out of this video chat at all. You can register for that while this video chat is going on, so please do that. That link will be available up until the last 5 minutes of this very chat. All right, now I got all that out of the way. Let us discuss the topic at hand, hacking cloud collaboration tools. And when we talk about that, we're specifically targeting Google Workspace, which, by the way, rebranded, formerly known as G Suite, and Office 365. I have seen this. I'm going to start with you, Michael. I have seen this happen before where people say, hey, I have normal protections in place. I have SSO. I've got MFA. I've got firewalls. I've got your basic stuff. Why is this not enough to protect a specific tool? Why do I need a specific tool-oriented security program in place? Michael.
Yeah, it's a great question because, the fundamentals are we look at strong authentication. We think about that single sign-on. We think about 2-factor auth. We push people to UTF and all of those things. But, I got here to Altitude Networks through many years of pain and toil in the security industry myself. I was CISO at Twitter. I was head of security at Mozilla. And I lived and breathed these platforms all the time. And I think what many of you have probably seen is it's just so easy for anyone to make a mistake and share information the wrong way. It could be a typo. It could be auto-suggest, anything like that.
An auto-suggest. And that's, by the way, we've seen that way back in the day of auto-suggest a person's name and you forward it off to someone incorrectly. So, yeah, human error is pretty darn easy on these tools.
Yeah, and I really think that if you unpack it, where we ended up is we took like our classic way of thinking of security and said, hey, if you want to share information or change the access control list, in the old days, you're like, let's go ask a team to do that. And they vet all these requests and it's super slow. And we said, well, hey, let's just flip that model on its head. Let's let every person change the access control list whenever they want. And so now you've got thousands of your employees like, I want to change this permission. I want to change that one. And all that authentication those controls really go out the window if you share it by link, if you share it to your mom's personal email account or any of those things. So a lot of things we can unpack there, but I think that's kind of the beginning. Like we flipped the model on its head and said, everybody go do whatever you want. Good luck.
All right, Steve, let me ask you the same thing. I'm assuming you have these kinds of tools in place in your environment. What was the situation you had where you realized you needed a solution like this?
It's after the authentication piece. They're in. And then now they have full control on how they want to share their data. And what we often see is inadvertent public sharing of calendars, docs, spreadsheets, images, videos, even KeyPass backups. And I'm just like, why would you want to do that? And it goes back to human error again.
Mm-hmm. By the way, is all these protections mostly, Michael? Because I mean, there are, we usually think about malicious intent, but have you found the overwhelming majority of the need for this is for human error?
So I really think it's a spectrum. And what's fascinating is in security, we often rotate to the absolute worst case scenarios. I mean, how many people hear, their threat models, you start thinking about like nation state actors and that. And then you step back and it's like, wait a minute, the nation state isn't coming for us. Like we didn't patch a machine. Like any random kid on the internet could scan us and hack us. When you unpack that threat model, you realize, wait, there's advanced attackers. Sure, maybe they're coming after you. That's a unique small set of group. There's like the main set of opportunistic attackers. But then we have this whole space of like mistakes, carelessness. And that's the part that can put data at risk all the time. That's the unprotected file store, the file attachment being sent the wrong way. And when you amplify that to all your employees and all your documents as your normal mode of business, it becomes a huge area. So I wouldn't say it's the majority of the problem, but I would say it's a huge chunk. Now, that is one part. Anybody can make a mistake and your earnings just got shared by mistake beforehand. That's huge. But then think about the other part of, well, what about a malicious insider? And term insider can be pretty broad now. What if they did want to steal data out of these platforms? Do we have any monitoring controls? Like if I was going to steal data, I'd do it about 6 months before I told you I'm quitting the company. And again, all of these are new things of thinking about how do you think about that when your entire sense of work has moved into these new cloud platforms?
Mm-hmm.
And there's Google dorking too, right? Which is another thing that is a huge threat to us.
Dorking?
Google dorking.
Excuse my ignorance. Yeah. I don't know what that term means. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's just using Google, because Google just likes to index everything. You can use these advanced search parameters to find specific, file types. As an example, certain information that you find in a URL, title, in text. You can even use it to search for data within open S3 buckets. Mm-hmm. So it goes back to these misconfigurations and all these situations that lead to all these risks in the cloud because we're just so much more open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, so can we go talk though, like one layer down in terms of what is the intrinsic nature of the openness that's happening, and I guess what is, quote, the protection you're putting on it to prevent the mistakes from happening? Like, is it just another ask? Like, are you sure this is the thing you want to do, Michael? What's happening?
Yeah, I think it's a great point because even Google and Microsoft, they've taken some obvious steps to try and help prevent users from doing dumb things. They've tried to make the defaults not sharing to the world, which a few years ago it actually your environment would be set up by default to share everything everywhere, which is terrifying. Mm-hmm. They added things like, are you sure you want to send it to this external person? Even me, in my role, focusing on this problem, I've still blindly clicked through that thing and go, oops, come back. But to get to the specific of the issue, the problem is that you could share it in ways you don't want. And so this, again, mistake or malice, but you could share something by link to the company, share it by link to the world, to personal accounts, to the wrong address. And the solution, in my view, in our view, is that you can't burden the user too much. We can't ask them, 100 times, like, are you really sure? Are you doubly sure? And we can't also say that sharing in its nature is bad. You have marketing materials that are shared to the world. What we've really created is a massive haystack And inside that big, big haystack are a few needles of really bad things. And that is, for example, you just shared your salary doc, exported the salary doc to the whole company by link. That's a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the solution is not to always bother the user, or even bother them much, but instead say, what if you could understand all of that sharing and say, this one is a problem. This is a highly sensitive file shared in an obvious wrong way. And you could do that generically for every company, knowing that nobody wants to leak earnings or share salary stuff before it should be. And then you could also customize it for a company. You know, we all have our special code names. I sure wouldn't want Project Wildfire to be leaked too fast. So let's put that in the mix.
So, Steve, let me ask you, is this a combination of manual and automated tagging, if you will, like the way that Michael just described it? What's happening here?
Yeah, so every organization is going to be different. And I didn't really understand how hard this problem was going to be for me until I entered the media and entertainment business because of how people do work. So I have users who are considered corporate workforce, corporate users. I have users who are in production, and then production spit out to theatrical and television. And then within that world, it's a combination of some corporate workforce, but a lot of freelancers. And if you've ever stayed to watch the end credits of any movie, it's long. That's a lot of people per film or per production. So the challenge that we've come across is it's not easily predictable, because a lot of these freelancers, they could be freelance composers, editors, FX artists, things like that. And they use personal Gmail, Outlook, things like that. So it's really hard to have a predictable model because it's just so diverse and so random that if we put controls in place to let's say tag only certain like company names and domains, well, we have a good population of users that don't follow that ontology of how we do naming conventions, things like that. So it makes it really difficult to share. And in the movie biz and TV business, it's all about fast collaboration, very low tolerances for things getting in the way, because tight schedule timelines, because they're working backwards from a release date. It's very aggressive. And then anything that is delayed is going to go over budget. So there's the budgetary concerns too as well. So how do we do this? And especially when everyone is distributed too, because filming takes place all over the world, right? Mm-hmm. And then pandemic hits. And then now add on top of that, now my global workforce is now distributed everywhere.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was enlightened to a lot of this. We had Melody Hildebrandt on our podcast a while back. She's the CISO for Fox Film and Television. And she described the same exact problem where you get an incredibly distributed audience. They need actual content from the film. Like a composer needs to see a portion of the film to be able to do composition. But do they need the high resolution version of that film? And how are we distributing this kind of content? And how are we putting labels and tags and making sure? So I got to imagine in your environment in particular, you've got a slew of content and a slew of people, all that have to have sort of different protections about sharing and quality and the amount. I mean, I would assume the categorization, and this, by the way, goes to the question that Chris Jones has here. How are organizations handling document classification to prevent inadvertent or malicious data loss? So is just the classification the problem that you try to manage, Steve? Like in everything, like from the content to the people and all the classification. I mean, that much just alone is a tantamount task, it sounds like. Yes?
It is. And I feel like sometimes going through this exercise just reminds me how, not all data are created equal. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to go through classification when we talk about Word documents and spreadsheets, things like that. But when we get into, media, digital assets, it gets more and more challenging.
So let me take this to you, Michael. Because that seems like a ludicrous job, is endless classification. So when you're dealing with the content from all the different media you're dealing with and the people, what are means to simplify this process?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, because there are so many approaches we've taken in security where, like, hey, I've got a solution for you. All you need to do is put your army of 10 security engineers on the problem with my tool and 6 months of work, and maybe we'll do something. I'm like, oh my God. I actually wanted to buy a solution, not spend all of my team's resources on this. And I think on this problem in particular, the issue of data classification is really one of the core initial problems. Because again, back to this like signal to noise haystack problem, there are tens of thousands of files being moved around all the time. And you can't just say, hey, it's shared with the world, therefore it's a problem. Like, I don't care. I don't need you to tell me that for thousands of files. And so, when we embarked on solving this problem, this was one of the first things. Like, what if we could automatically classify files for people? So now you have signal and you can separately look at noise if you want, because that's what you care about. And the burden of asking a company to label documents themselves, I was telling Steve the other day, in my more naive time back at Mozilla years ago, I once thought up a data classification approach and said, hey guys, label your documents if it's for public or if it's for internal only. That lasted, all of one day on the one document I used as an example. So it's really a non-starter, and you have to walk in the door and say, we'll make this easy. It works on day one. It automatically classifies your data. So now you can think about the risks that actually matter.
But let me get into the automatically classifying.
Sure.
That can, in all cases, that can only go so far. So to what level are we automating? What level are we being manual? And what level can we be successful? And there's always the fear of the thing we didn't automatically classify correctly that leaks out. How do we prevent that problem?
Yeah. Well, right now we're in a scenario where people are neck deep in boiling water. Like, there is just tons of problems in terms of the collaboration space. So the question of like, does one leak by at the very end? Well, let's solve the first 99.5%. I think that as we did data classification previously in the industry and overly relied on regex approaches, we found like the false positive and false negative problems of those. Like, how would you find a board deck from regexes? Just not very easy. So if you take a two-pronged approach that we've started, which is start with metadata, start with characteristics of the file name, who it's being shared with, how that name is structured, the words, the misspellings. You can tune an engine like that to get very good breadth of coverage and pretty good accuracy, and then follow that with a second pass of like a content inspection. But if you do that 1-2 punch with context of how it's being shared, like, oh, this is shared to this audience. That's not normal. This is a sensitive file based on this and this file name parameters, content parameters. Then you can get into a spot where you're actually bringing good signal and like, hey, these are high value issues we really want to tackle.
All right, let me get to some of the questions we have here. This one came in from Kevin Hackinson, who is our last week winner. We'll see him on camera in just a second. Last week winner of Best Bad Idea. By the way, the bad ideas are flowing in, and I can't keep up with all of these. There's a lot of them. One of them I saw early on was having my mother or the person who posted mother do your data classification, or setting your controls on your cloud environment. I think that could be actually a good what's worse scenario, whose mother would be worse at doing this. But then again, I know my own mom, and I don't know this other person's mom, but I know my mom would be pretty incapable of it. All right, here we go. From Kevin Hackinson. In Microsoft Teams, an end user can create a team, invite external guests, and install external apps into channels. In Power Automate, aka Flow, they can create automated workflows and have access to data across your organization. Therefore, non-admin Microsoft 365 users are effectively provisioning cloud storage and compute resources, yet the administration and monitoring functionality of Office 365 is distributed across multiple websites. How do you set process and policy for this? I'll start with you, Steve. Have you dealt with this very problem?
This is what keeps me up at night. It's top of mind for me because it's just, it's a supply chain security issue. And it's the blind spots. It's the users increasing our attack surface without us knowing, and it's very hard to control because of these ability to just authenticate to third-party applications using a cloud collaboration tool.
And Mike, you were nodding your head along too. I mean, is there some other solution you deal with this?
Well, this is the whole path collaboration has taken. Google's not any different than this. This is this notion of you've empowered the users to do all sorts of decision making. They can provision access. They can bring in third-party apps. They can just do everything. It really is the challenge of like you have two big options up front: turn it all off, or let it roam free. And I've seen neither of those work well because you can only hold the users back from what they want to do so long. And so I do think you need this middle ground of let's let them do things with guardrails, and let's have intelligence to know when they skip those guardrails with a automatic remediation approach to it.
All right. Oh, I just saw the poll went up. It's 20 minutes past the hour, and that means the poll for all the best bad ideas is going up. And remember, we're going to be playing Beat the Bad Idea this time, and we'll be playing What's Worse. So please vote for your favorite bad ideas to essentially appear in that. And then Kevin Hackinson, who's on board, please remember at 30 minutes past the hour, email us the 2 What's Worse scenarios so we know what that is. All right, back to our questions here. This one goes from Ian Pointer, and he asks, how would you recommend, and this goes to essentially something I was asking earlier, but he's actually also asking about a cost issue as well. How would you recommend management of the tiers of users, so employees, contractors, casual contacts, etc.? Do they all get cloud accounts? And how do we manage the cost? Let me actually, you deal with this at an umpteen level, Steve. How are you controlling this? And dealing with the cost of this, I'm assuming there's tiers of usage and all that. What do you do?
Oh, no, that's a great question. That's exactly what I deal with is, I'm separating my corporate workforce. So I have, predictable costs there. It's consistent. And then we get to freelance for all the different productions. And we work with these vendors. We look at, do you have a pricing model that allows just, how often they authenticate, for example, per month. And it's just based on peer usage because, even when, we have users for television, for as an example. Sometimes they're in season, sometimes they're not in season. When they're not in season, we're not paying for those accounts because they're not active.
So do these services allow you to do that? So if someone becomes dormant and does not connect, but you don't have to pull them off the system and then bring them back on?
Correct. We just suspend them. Right. We suspend them. And then when show's back in season, we just unsuspend it and then we'll start getting charged again. So then we actually classify the different types of users. And then we go to the vendor saying, hey, these are the users. They're going to sign in all the time, users, sometimes, and then not that much. So we've noticed that a lot of these vendors are very accommodating to the different use cases.
Oh, that must make your life a lot easier instead of if you have to pull them completely off and then create a new account for them, then you don't have to go through this whole process of classifying them and their sensitivity to access. And this, by the way, I'm assuming with the work that you're doing, Michael, this sort of still plays hand in hand, yes?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing about it is the accounts can go in and out from maybe active and suspended. The question that comes into play is, do they still own the data? Because if you have an account that's suspended, in many cases, they still have ownership of the data and the data is still live to be accessed by others, which is one of the challenges. If somebody leaves the company, all their files are still in use. And so whether or not you transfer them to someone else, you still have that risk of them being shared the wrong way. And the other kind of interesting component to this is thinking about they operate in their primary collaboration platform. Maybe that's 365 or G Suite. But then oftentimes people have other platforms they're using too. So you think of this like N squared problem of like, well, they've got 365 and Box and other platforms. And so now you're wondering, all right, which way did that file go? Is it being shared the wrong way in this platform or that platform or yet a third?
By the way, Ian is asking a very good question. Andrew, try to bring Ian on as soon as you can. Let's go to another question while we're waiting for Ian to come on. Oh, no, Ian's here. All right, great.
Oh, I have to do this because I actually have a shirt.
T-shirt.
And I'm
is Dutch in the chat? I don't know if I saw him in there.
I don't know. It would figure if I have the T-shirt when he's not in the chat.
All right.
But anyway.
Ian Pointer, a security consultant, is on. What's your question? I think it's an extension of sort of the managing of all these rights, yes?
Yeah, it's follow-on. I mean, the question that I asked that you guys had definitely interesting answers to, I lived that for real. We suspended accounts. Then we had to have a full-time person to manage them for the suspensions because they all forget their passwords. And they also... well, there was another related thing, but we suspended the accounts partially to keep the audit trail. So we actually suspended them for 90 days, even if the person left, and then deleted them, even though it cost us money. So I guess my question is, are there any third-party services or things that you've used that make that easier? Because we had a hard time finding anything.
Guys, I mean, I don't think that's part of your solution, is it, Michael? What Ian described, or am I wrong?
If it's specifically around the problem of suspending and unsuspending, not really our forte. We're all about make sure your data doesn't get lost or stolen, and as we've seen here, all the nuances and where that can happen. I mean, that's an interesting scenario, the workflow management of authorizing or suspending accounts across the board.
Yeah, I mean, the two tie together, but yeah, I didn't expect you necessarily to magically fix it. That was more sort of aimed at Steve.
No, but going back to you, Steve, this is just a situation where you just have staff doing this, managing it, yes? Or am I wrong?
Well, it depends on how the resources are being utilized. So for us, it's a collaboration not only within our own team, but within the IT organization as well. And then we automate, we integrate our ticketing system into these things to automate a lot of those workflows. So it's not a ticket coming in and then a user then having to go, or an IT staff going in and doing something. So we actually use automation within our ticketing system. So as these requests goes in, click a button, and then it does the action, like say reactivate and things like that and suspend. So it unburdens our team because then now we have clear division of work and clearly defined lines of operations between who's accountable for identity, who's accountable for, authentication, authorization, things like that.
All right, let me remind everybody. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ian.
Oh, no, I was going to say we had HR system integration, so it actually made it HR's problem to know who was an employee now, who wasn't, who was a contractor, who was supposed to have a badge but didn't actually get paid. I mean, we had a whole bunch of, it was a research organization, but it actually mirrors very closely what you were talking about with MGM. So,
hey, now go ahead, David.
Oh, I just want to quickly mention, everybody, we just have about 3 minutes left in the poll, so please vote for your favorite bad ideas. And by the way, also, if you haven't clicked on the event for next week, please do that. But again, we're only 3 minutes, and then we're going to be playing our Beat the Bad Idea. Okay, Michael, my apologies.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, on the discussion, though, of the suspending accounts and the workflows, one thing that we have uncovered that has been surprising is the need to add a step in your offboarding or suspension process that actually looks at correlated personal accounts. What we've basically found is because of this inadvertent typo sharing or maybe purposeful to personal accounts, if you have a step where you can say, hey, Bob's leaving the company, does Bob have a personal account that has access to like 1,000 company files? And we've seen that through our tool worked into the offboarding workflow for exactly that. Like, there's Bob. There's his personal account. Let's go ahead and remove access to all of our corporate files. And now you can go ahead and have a nice day as you move on from the company.
Yeah, I think, Michael, you bring up a great point because now, as I'm kind of thinking right now, we have an investigation arm of our team. And now I'm asking myself, are we doing enough to get an understanding of what this user had access to, how they shared it? Because as they're being offboarded, I think a lot of times you get into a habit of, all right, account disabled within X amount of time per policy, and then we just forget about it. But we forget about those residual trails that they've created over their time within the organization. So I think someone who's been within the organization for a long time would have more history of those residuals that I think we overlook or don't even look at all.
All right, I'm going to ask you guys one more question. And I know we're almost at the time for our game, but let me ask this question, which, by the way, we'll return to it after the game too as well. We've been talking mostly about inadvertent mistakes, all right, majority and classification. We have not talked about malicious, which is common. And Steve, you mentioned earlier on, like, once they're in, now I got a problem. And we know that almost all cases of hacking, or not almost all, what am I saying? A huge majority, definitely the majority, is because someone gets legitimate credentials and gets physically in. So what is the main protection or concern? Let's just start really high here. I'm going to start with you, Michael. What is the main protection and concern around malicious attacks around these tools? Like, what is it that they're doing? And is it just like what Steve said, they get legitimate credentials. Now they're in. I got a problem.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern is it doesn't require legitimate credentials. If I'm going to be malicious, I'm going to sprinkle external accounts onto files that I want to keep access to when I leave. Or I'm going to flip them into world readable mode by link, and I'll keep track of those links. Or I'm going to authorize an application to connect to the cloud instance to siphon data off. All of those things are small blips amongst massive amounts of noise. And there's no way you're going to find them through log review or checking out a bad person, anything. That's the thing that requires that data science analysis to find those little tiny pieces. And so I think that's really what's so scary about this, is it's so easy to be bad and no one is going to catch you unless they have a system that could look for that.
And by the way, and that goes to my earlier question. And again, because I've heard this about enterprise, ERP solutions for these cloud tools, things like this, is the general protections you put in place are not enough because of what you just said. Is there are things intrinsic to the platforms that make them great, also make them more vulnerable, as you described. Steve, what have you discovered in this area? And then we're going to go to our game. In terms of specifically the malicious attack, the way that Michael described, or in other ways, for that matter.
Yeah, phishing, common email attack vector, and when you look at the email messages in a compromised inbox, it's just links, attachments, and now you click on the link. Cool, this is a Google Drive link. This is a Box link, OneDrive link, or whatever it is. But Google dorking. I never underestimate Google dorking because you can actually search for these share links. It looks random and looks long, and users feel like they have this false insecurity. Oh, it's just so long and random. Like, how are people going to search this? My computer's locked down.
Obscurity, essentially.
Right, yeah. Right. And they feel comfortable knowing, oh, I don't do anything that could harm, my computer in a way where I'm going to get malware and things like that. So they think they're fine, but they don't realize, once you give that link away to someone, you lose control of that link, right? Mm-hmm. Secondly, well, Google's indexing these search links too. And I don't think people realize that Google is indexing these public search links.
Exactly. It's the indexing the public search link. So now it's available to any and all, no matter how random and odd the link may look. All right.
Right.
We've got our game. What? No, that's not the game. This game.
It's time to play Beat the Bad Idea.
All right. This is our new game, Beat the Bad Idea. I haven't even looked at all these bad ideas and what they've voted. And hopefully everybody has voted appropriately. There was one that I saw here. Oh, okay, here, because I saw others were talking about that, and they like this. All right. So the premise of this is what I'm going to describe is actually in play. Michael, I'll have you go first here. And here's the situation. What are the controls you're going to put around this? Open up all collaboration tools to get public contributions. So essentially just what you said, Steve. So the thing that you just feared, it's the entire thing. So it's a Wikipedia of your company data. Essentially, your entire corporate data is now a very, very public wiki that people can see and even contribute to, for that matter. So your collaboration platform is now the planet. This seems pretty severe. Michael, how are you going to beat this bad idea?
Oh my God.
It's a doozy.
So, all right. So we've gone full transparent mode. All data is being shared to everyone and searchable.
Pretty much you couldn't ask for a worse scenario.
Yeah. Okay. So then we have to assume then that anything we put out there is now public knowledge. So I guess if we want to keep something secret, we can't put it in the system, which is hard. That's going to do user education for us immediately. If we don't want to use such a system for sensitive collaboration, there must be an alternative if the scenario was to work. And I think people would know instantly that they couldn't do that because they would immediately have the worst consequence. Also, it would make us then invest in a real-time analysis of files to say, this is sensitive, it cannot go out, you got to stop it immediately. And I kind of feel like we're there. We're just there at the layer of obscurity anyways, because that's kind of the reality we're in. But man, that's a hard one. I think, oh no.
Yeah, you're struggling here. I'm going to take this one to Steve. Steve, I think there's a more critical answer here. Steve, how are you going to handle this?
Shut everything down. Easy. Get rid of all my users.
Shut everything down. Oh no, the two of you are failing miserably. Now, granted, this was a tough one. This was a doozy, and kudos to whoever put this bad idea in there. The answer is you completely change your business model. You are now 100% public. That is the correct answer. All right, let's go to the next one. Let's see if you fare better on this next one. All right, so I liked this very first one up here. If a hacker appears as a cat, or I would say just let them in, cats are cute. How are you going to handle this? I will start with you, Steve. So essentially the hacker is a cat. Maybe their handle is cat. They come on on a video conference looking like a cat, just like the lawyer did. Essentially, anytime you see a cat, that's essentially, you have an automated, well, I'll just add, an automated rule, all cats automatically get in. How do you handle this?
Man, these are tough.
Yeah, they are. It's beat the bad idea.
Start inviting dogs.
Started. Oh, come on, Michael. Come on, to handle this one better.
All right.
Okay,
All right.
So by the way, we're 0 for 3 right now. Come on, you gotta come in with a winner here.
I got something for this one. All right, we're gonna do voice authentication automatically of people. So we don't need to know any visuals. So we don't care if they look like cats. We'll tie that to geotags and endpoint analysis. So with those 3 points of data, we can feel confident that the person's been authenticated, even if they look like a cat.
Good answer. You set up other mitigations. Good job, Michael. You pulled it off. All right. Hopefully you're going to redeem yourself in the What's Worse game, which we will play shortly. We have some more questions, and just we'll be in about 8 minutes. We'll play What's Worse. So Kevin, please get ready to come on for that. All right. Here comes a question from Jacob Kaluzny, who was voted. This was voted up. By the way, please, we have a handful of questions. Please vote up your favorite questions here. How do you track shadow? Okay. So there is, all right, this is perfect because this happened. This has been around for a while. You have your stated collaboration tools, whether it's Google Workspace or Office 365. And Jacob asks, Kaluzny asks, how do you track shadow IT collaboration tools that were not blessed by the IT security department? Now, I mean, data classification means nothing if the users just start using WeTransfer or Mega Transfers or something like that. I got to imagine, Steve, this is a problem you deal with plenty. Yes, especially moving video files. Problem, they don't use your platform; they use some other platform. How do you manage that?
Yeah, this was a tough one for us, and how we tackled that challenge was we had to get telemetry from multiple sources. There's not going to be any one source of information that's going to help solve this problem. So we started looking at firewall logs as an example, and it started seeing, and through their kind of app classification, seeing the type of traffic, how much is going to Dropbox, Box, Google Drive, and things like that. And then now we have an idea of some of the applications they're using. Then we reach out to those platforms, and then they provided a list of, hey, these are the people that signed up using a work email address. So it's not the same as us provisioning them on an enterprise version of whatever application they're using. Mm-hmm. So that was part of it too. And then user awareness, education, policies, just reminding them, hey, we're not here to get in the way of your work, but you have to let us know how you're doing that. So it's a combination of administrative controls and technical controls to combat that problem.
That's excellent. And so if I'm hearing you correctly, I mean, you still let it happen. You're not happy about it, but you let it happen, and you have to slap the controls because you don't go into a situation of stop using Dropbox, stop doing that. You must use our sort of the IT approved solution here. Yes? Is that
correct?
And
then that's why I like Altitude too, because they give me visibility on the authentication to third-party apps too. So more telemetry data for me to work off of. Like, wow, I didn't realize this app even exists. I never heard of it. It must be an upcoming thing. Let's do some more research on that. But then we blend this into our zero trust architecture too as well, and then it makes it easier for us to address the situation. and it could be, different. It's case by case.
Mm-hmm. But now you're getting visibility into it, which
right. More
regularly
visibility.
we don't have visibility into shadow
Right.
IT. So Michael, maybe you can explain this in greater detail. What's actually happening in sort of behind the scenes?
Yeah. So the kind of the supply chain element of collaboration really falls into that OAuth apps that connect in. And so the example, we can imagine using like a legit platform, like, I don't know, DocuSign or something, like, hey, let's connect that into our cloud app. It can access our files. That's all good. The risky things are when either employees are like, I want to install Pokemon Go on my phone, and it asks for a login via OAuth, like, done. And now Pokemon Go is connected to your cloud instance. Or what's also scary is you can control that if you want in your organization. Again, kind of hard filters on or off. But think about your contractors. We've seen specific cases where outsourced contract teams install apps themselves. And because that person has access to your G Suite or 365 instance, their apps reach in and grab it. So we had an outsourced legal team's pseudo shady cloud backup software grabbing a customer's data and moving it somewhere else. Again, all things that you need that visibility. So you can first of all say, I had no control over you, third-party domain, but I now know what you're doing with my data, and we're going to have a conversation about this.
Wow, that's some pretty good insight there. All right, another question came in, and just 4 minutes from our next game, so please, Kevin, be ready. This comes from Idan Gore. What would you consider a rogue application? Obviously, malicious one that is being installed as part of a phishing campaign, but what about, let's say, marketplace apps or other non-identified malicious apps which might be undercover? I'll start with you, Michael, on this. So, yeah. I mean, I'm assuming, let me just pause for a second. I'm assuming within your tool, you would have a list of apps, but like what Steve mentioned, there's always up-and-comers. Yes? Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
So how do you deal with the things that you don't know about, too?
Yeah, and a really good thing to realize is the black market of these applications. Once those apps get lots of installations, they're a target for compromise, or they get sold to bad actors because they know they have footholds in all these organizations that use them. So it's not an uncommon scenario. So really the question is not saying, do we absolutely trust this app forever? But rather, if it goes off rails, And so, for example, like if your app that helps with calendars, which also need a Google Drive, and everybody said, sure, if that starts downloading hundreds of files across all the users, you're going to want to know about that. Those kinds of signals are giving you that indication that something is wrong. We don't know why, but we know it's bad. And now we know what files it touched. We know what employees installed it or third parties. So I think the question is spot on. Rogue is not just the clearly, hey, I'm a bad app, don't ever trust me. It's any app could become rogue. It could become compromised, even those in marketplace, as we've seen from those that are getting pulled down eventually.
All right, let me throw this next question out to you. This is a very good question, and maybe you do encourage this, Steve, in your environment. This comes from Ian Pointer again. How can we encourage users to self-audit? So this goes into more of a sort of a security awareness training type thing. I used to have lists of, quote, you shared these files externally, sent to users with an opt-out, and they were quite good at self-policing. Are there other ways to enlist the user? So in everything you're doing, in terms of everything you described, is there a level of security awareness training or alerts that go up to sort of improve and direct good, digital, secure behavior? Steve?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we now have to shift into how we communicate to the users, being able to speak security without really speaking security, because they're not going to understand when we talk about the very using security jargon, things like that. It's just how do we use anecdotes and how do we make it more visceral to them in a way that they understand, hey, before I share something, these are the things I'm going to think about in a very plain English way. And from what we've discovered, that's been more effective because they get it, rather than, oh, I have to do this because it's policy. I have to do this because I saw this awareness training video and it's blah, blah, blah. But, when we put in a way where, hey, you have a diary, you have intimate secrets in there, right? That's no different from the intimate secrets of MGM. how would you handle your own personal diary that contains these sensitive information?
My co-host Mike Johnson has mentioned multiple times. We know that security awareness training sticks is when we first make it personal, when they and they come to us asking about personal security issues. Let me ask you, Michael, and I don't know if this is part of your tool or not, but is there some level of, awareness training of, do you know you're doing this kind of a thing, and that they can, let you know? I mean, and is there? And by the way, have you noticed with your apps and with your customers and stuff that sort of from day 1 to day 100 that, user behavior improves over time? What have you noticed, Michael?
Yeah, the kind of the crux of the issue is that many of the incorrect sharing actions, some of those can be resolved by security team because they have the context and understanding. Some things are very clear. Again, we shouldn't share the board deck to the whole world. That's obvious. Anybody can make the call. But the tricky thing about this, which gets to the user notification, is that context aware for things that are less obvious. And so right now, we can surface things directly to a security IT channel on Slack. Say, hey, this thing just got shared. It's obviously a high risk. Boom, one click, fixed. Where we're going next is taking that same thinking to the user. And this is where you got to be precise. You can't overwhelm those alerts. But hey, you just shared this salary-related document with the whole company. Is that really what you meant to do? And what I like about that is they have all the context. It's in real time, like, oh, I had no idea I even did that. That was one of the options. I picked the wrong one. Let me just push that button there and turn that off. So that's where I think we need to be, to have a system that is scalable, because you can't slow down this real-time collaboration. We can't put in big gates and go back to the old world. We have to have it work fast enough with that right interaction to users. And to your other question about, changes over time. Yeah, we are able to see the entire collaboration graph, every file, every sharing, every relationship. And we see that materially get better month over month, as we deploy. The craziest thing is we can go back in time and see every document in existence. And you can't imagine how much current risk you have on day one because of everything you've accumulated. So it's a really fascinating time, and feels great to know that we're, materially making people more secure.
All right, excellent. We have ready to bring our next game. Bring Kevin on.
It's time to play What's Worse?
All right, you guys are familiar with this. Kevin, if he can come on, has 2 scenarios. He's our last week, and he's accepting and connecting as we speak. These are 2 bad scenarios. And the idea with the What's Worse game is it's just pretty much a risk management exercise. You have to explain which of these 2 is a worse scenario, essentially would cause more damage. All right, Kevin, where is Kevin? He hasn't appeared yet. If he doesn't appear, I will read his scenarios because I do know what they are. But we'll give him a moment if he can come on, or I'll just ask the next question. If he's not there, where is he? Where's Kevin? I want him. Camera issues. All right, then if you've got camera issues, Kevin, fix that. Let me ask the next question, then we'll bring you on to play What's Worse. Steve asks, I don't even know what Microsoft consent is. There's a thing called Microsoft consent. What is Microsoft consent? Michael, Steve, you know what that is? No? Looking it up? No? All right. Let me ask this question because you don't even know what it is, because I've never heard of it either. Microsoft consent. All right. Maybe with Steve, it can explain it greater detail. Give me another invite. Oh, give another invite to Kevin as well. While we're waiting for him to come on, let me go back to the malicious issue as well, because we Larry says he can't turn off the cat filter. That's probably it. Let me go back to the malicious thing. Do you have a sense of what percentage from what you see is malicious and what is just darn, human mistakes? Or you know what? Let's hold this idea. Let's go back to Kevin. Kevin's on right here because that'll start a whole nother thing. All right. What's worse scenario? This is Kevin Hackinson, who with Ops Compass. Am I correct? Yes?
Yeah.
You're wearing the shirt. Excellent. You're a security architect over there. Am I right?
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff.
All right. He does a lot of stuff. All right.
Architect. You want to buy something? I'll sell to you.
Good. So Kevin has 2 bad that he has picked from the polls, 2 bad ideas for the What's Worse scenario. Please go ahead.
All right. 2 bad ideas. The first one, don't regulate the collaboration tool. Just let everyone use their personal Gmail accounts and the free G Suite environment, or maybe the Microsoft equivalent. Okay, that's the first bad idea, no regulation. Second one, don't use those fancy cloud collaboration tools. Just store it all on a NAS drive, hook it up to your CEO's laptop, share files with the SCP protocol, and make it easy and friendly like that over maybe even a DSL line. So,
all right, those are two pretty bad ideas. I'm going to throw this to you, Michael, first. Which one is worse, and why would it cause more damage?
I think the second one, the NAS idea, is worse because your competition is going to crush you. You have decided not to use good technology. You have decided not to let your company collaborate. Whether or not you're more secure doesn't matter because none of you have jobs.
Okay. All right, I throw this one to you, Steve. Which do you agree or disagree in terms of which one's worse?
I agree. Right, you lose agility, but then you also lose the ability to eventually put in visibility.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so essentially you're all out of a job. All right, good answers for both of you. Kevin, thank you very much, and congrats again for being winner of last year. All right, let's go back to our question. I was asking you about malicious versus inadvertent. I mean, maybe this is more of a question of why you started the business. I'm guessing because of the inadvertent mistakes that people make, that's why you saw the opportunity. But do you have a sense of what percentage the malicious attacks are versus the inadvertent? Because, by the way, and that I know this is kind of a hard question to answer, because when you make an inadvertent mistake, then malicious stuff starts happening. You know, so there's kind of malicious comes in two different ways. There's the direct malicious and the I made a stupid mistake and now malicious crap is happening as a result of my stupid mistake. So can you parse this out for me?
Yeah, I think either way you start from that pyramid, you have the risk either way. Regardless of their intent, the risk is there because you could lose the data one way or another. But yeah, getting to the crux of that is, well, what was the intent? Was it an accident and they didn't mean to, or were they purposely trying to take it? I think from a pure volume perspective, you have a large category of mistake. But that doesn't mean it represents less risk, because the smaller amount of the purposeful malice is huge amounts of risk. And what I mean there is what we often see in those situations is someone looking to take corporate secrets with them to a future company during an offboard, or because we're in a lot of very sensitive companies that are doing highly technical work, high value, high growth startups, et cetera, financial. And that information is very valuable. So I think you see huge amounts of risks on both sides, but different things that are leading to what's happening. And one thing I'll say is we look at malicious insiders and we call them the boogeyman. And we're like, you know what? They probably don't happen very often. They're very rare, et cetera, et cetera. In our tenure, already we have found multiple organizations with malicious insiders just in our proof of value phase before we even roll the whole product out. So the prevalence is incredibly surprising. I think it's because it's so easy. They don't think they're going to get caught. And really, up until now, they weren't.
What was your scenario? And then we're going to close the sucker out because we only have, by the way, we only have a few minutes left. Please, people, everyone click the button before to register for next week's video chat. That's going to change in just a couple of minutes. So click on it now to register for next week to participate. That's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have, I know we're going to have the head of the director of information security from Sally May on, and also the CTO for Kenna Security will be with us as well, talking about hacking cloud vulnerabilities. Steve, what did you see environmentally wise in terms of the inadvertent versus the malicious, or maybe like when you did the proof of concept with altitude and you saw maybe your eyes were open then? What did you see?
What we saw was, we are really great at catching things before it becomes a problem because of the visibility. The first thing is gaining that visibility. And I sought that visibility to get an idea before we can even do anything further down the strategy, because there's no point in just, I don't know where I'm going. So give me some visibility, lay of the land, baselining, to kind of get an idea of not only what we have, but in how it's being shared and utilized. Very few incidences so far regarding this because we've been very proactive on it. But it's really hard to say how much OSINT people are actually doing with us because we're just heavy in the cloud.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's your operation. You have to do that. All right. Let's change the link at the bottom, and I'm going to wrap this up, and then I'm going to come back to you guys for final comments on this. So let me just sort of remind everybody that our topic for our topic for next week is hacking cloud vulnerabilities, an hour of critical thinking, the risk and reward of the cloud-based vulnerability management. I'm sorry, if you did not click the link at the bottom because it just changed to our icebreaker, please just go to our website, CISOseries.com. There's always a way to register there. Stick around for our icebreaker. If you've never participated, it is a lot of fun. Just a series of one-on-one meetups with another cybersecurity professional. Part of this, you can talk about the event or talk about heck anything you want to talk about. It does not matter at all. A huge thanks again to our sponsor, Altitude Networks. We really, really appreciate it. This was a really fun and fascinating conversation for me. I know that. I appreciate it. If you want to sponsor a video chat, email me. We are actually booked out already through the end of March. So we have availability starting to open up in April. So please just ping me at david@cisoseries.com and we can do that. All right. We have just about 3 minutes left. So I'm going to ask for a quick 1 minute wrap up. Your top advice on this topic. I'll start with you, Steve. For those in similar scenarios where you have these tools in the environment, what is your number one advice?
Be adaptable. Find novel ways. Don't look at it as a monolithic solution or try and find a monolithic solution to this. It's just, you have to be really diverse and novel in how we're going to solve this challenge. Because cloud was designed to allow ease of collaboration, and what comes with that is the diverseness of that collaboration. So we have to come up with a model that allows us to be agile in that way, that we can also take a very diverse approach to solutions as well, and not just expect, all right, this is how I'm going to solve it, and it's a one size fit all. It's not. It's never going to be one size fit all.
Well, I was quite impressed what you said regarding the fact that when you do see people collaborating using Dropbox or some other tool you've never heard of, you don't shut it down. You start putting controls around it, meaning allowing people to do their work. Although, I mean, I'm assuming at the same time, like, oh, I see you're collaborating via Dropbox. Do you know that we have this solution on, Office 365 kind of thing? Do you do something like that? Yes.
Yeah, and then sometimes they don't know that we actually have an enterprise version of like Dropbox or Google Drive, and then we ask them to put in requests, and then we convert their personal account using a work email address into a enterprise controlled account now. But it's completely transparent from their end, because to Michael's point earlier, if we keep being really strict around these controls and controlling how they work, they're going to find a way, right? It's just like Jurassic Park. Life finds a way.
Always. It's so funny. You say that. If you even look at the history of the Enigma machine, which was essentially the decoding box that the Germans used during World War, it was people finding a way around using that. There's the whole history of security break-ins are people finding a way around to make their life simpler. All right, just with 1 minute, Michael, I'm going to you. Your top tip on people on how to, look at, if they've got these tools in their environment, how to look at security.
Yeah. The first thing is to put this in perspective from a risk modeling, threat modeling perspective. If we thought of a SMB share inside of our company that was open to everyone and then open to the whole world, we would probably all lose our minds. That's terrible. That's unacceptable. We have to shut it down immediately. We have to find it. We have to protect the files. We have created that reality with all of our collaboration tools. It can happen anywhere all the time. And to realize that right now we have no controls. Single sign-on MFA doesn't help the problem. So think about it from risk management on how high it should be on your priority list. Probably pretty high. 2, don't try and squash it. The usability is what makes it powerful. It was what makes you beat your competitors. Think about a smart solution that can connect into it and can sanity check what's happening. I think I really think that's where we got to go. If you're gonna beat your competition, you have to adapt new technology and find a way to do it securely.
Excellent answer. Thank you very much, Steve Tran, who's the CISO of NGM Studios. Thank you, Michael Coates, who's the CEO of Altitude Networks. Thanks to Altitude Networks for sponsoring. Thank you to everybody else. Click the darn link below. Join us in the meetup. There's only a handful of you there now. Get over there. Click. Let's join. Thank you, Andrew. Take us out.